How many times have you built the perfect routine, planned every hour of your day with military precision, promised yourself that this time would be different, but a week later you were back to chaos? Miyamoto Musashi woke up every day at 4 in the morning for decades, not because he had a productivity app or a motivational coach, but because his routine wasn't a to-do list. It was a sacred ritual that defined who he was. While you treat your routine as a prison, you need to escape on weekends. Musashi saw it as the dojo, where he forged his soul day after day. The difference between you and history's greatest warrior isn't talent. It's how each of you approaches the same 24 hours. The brutal truth nobody tells you is that your routine fails because you built it on motivation, not identity. You wake up early when you feel inspired, train when you have energy, meditate when you're stressed. Musashi did all of this regardless of how he felt, because he understood the concept of Shūgyō, the ascetic training where every daily action isn't a means to an end, but the path itself. He didn't have a routine to become a great warrior. He was a great warrior because his routine defined him. When you understand this inversion, everything changes. Your routine stops being something you do and becomes who you are. In this video, you'll discover the exact routine Musashi followed daily, not as historical curiosity, but as a blueprint you can apply today. Every element has a specific purpose in transforming an ordinary man into an unstoppable force. If you follow this structure for the next 90 days, you won't just optimize your time, you'll rebuild your identity from scratch. The question isn't whether this works. The question is, are you ready to stop playing at productivity and finally live like a warrior lives? Every Monday you're reborn. You wake up early, exercise, eat right, work focused. Tuesday, you're still going strong. Wednesday, you start to waver. By Thursday, your routine's already in pieces, and by the weekend, you surrender to complete chaos, promising to restart next Monday. This infinite cycle doesn't happen because you're weak or lazy, but because you built your routine on quicksand. You treat it as a series of obligations imposed by an ambitious version of yourself, not as the natural expression of who you really want to be. The deadly trap is in how you think about routine. For you, it's a temporary contract, something you follow until you reach a goal and then can relax. Buy the dream car and you can stop saving. Lose 10 pounds and you can go back to eating junk. Build the business and you can slow down. This transactional thinking destroys any possibility of real consistency. Musashi never thought this way. When he won his 60th duel and became invincible, he didn't retire his sword. He intensified his training because he understood that routine doesn't serve to achieve something, it exists to sustain who you are. Your routine falls apart because it's disconnected from your identity. You wake up early not because you're a man who rises before the sun, but because you want to be productive. You train not because you're a warrior who honors his body as a temple, but because you want to look good. When the external reward delays or disappears, motivation evaporates, and with it, your entire structure. The samurai had a word for this, mu, emptiness. Not negative emptiness, but emptiness of external expectations, where action exists for its own sake. And this understanding changes everything when you grasp the true meaning of the path Musashi walked. Shūgyō is a Japanese word with no direct translation in English. It means something close to disciplined training or austere practice, but its true meaning goes far beyond. For the samurai, Shūgyō was the understanding that life itself is a dojo. Every moment is training, and every action is an opportunity for refinement. There's no separation between training and living. When Musashi walked a dusty road, he was training. When he ate simple rice, he was training. When he slept on the cold floor of a cave, he was training. Everything was practice. Everything was the way. You live in separate compartments. There's the you who works, the you who trains, the you who rests, the you who has fun. Each version follows different rules, and when one fails, you simply change masks. The samurai didn't have this luxury. He was the same man on the battlefield and in the tea garden. The same discipline that kept him alive in combat guided him in preparing a meal or sharpening his sword. Musashi taught that when you fragment your life, you fragment your power. But when you understand that waking up early isn't preparation for life, it is life itself, everything transforms. The concept of Shūgyō destroys the modern idea of work-life balance. There's no balance because there's no separation. There's only the way, and you're on it or off it at every moment. When Musashi spent years isolated in the mountains training alone, people thought he was preparing for something grand. But he wasn't preparing, he was living. Training was the goal, not a means. And when you internalize this, when your routine stops being preparation and becomes expression, something magical happens. But for this to work, you need to understand the fundamental difference between having a schedule and practicing a sacred ritual. Your schedule is a to-do list optimized for maximum efficiency. Wake at 5 a.m., train at 5:30 a.m., coffee at 6:15 a.m., work at 7 a.m. Each time block has a practical function, a measurable result, an objective to be met. You follow this schedule with the same energy an employee punches a clock, doing the bare minimum to check the box and move to the next task. There's no soul, no intention, no presence. It's mechanical, empty, unsustainable. That's why you quit in the first week when the novelty passes and the schedule reveals itself for what it really is, a self-imposed prison. A sacred ritual is completely different. When Musashi woke before dawn, it wasn't just to gain more productive hours in the day. It was an act of reverence to the quietest moment of existence, when the world still sleeps and the warrior meets himself. Every movement had meaning. The way he washed his face wasn't hygiene, it was purification. The way he sat in meditation wasn't relaxation, it was preparation for internal war. Ritual transforms the ordinary into extraordinary through intention. The same action that in your schedule is just morning exercise becomes, in the samurai's ritual, the forge of discipline that will sustain the entire day. The crucial difference is in the energy with which you execute. A schedule drains you because each task is an obligation that needs to be fulfilled to reach the end of the day. A ritual energizes you because every action is an affirmation of identity, a sacred vow renewed. Musashi didn't train to check a box, he trained because it was who he was. When you transform your routine into ritual, waking early stops being sacrifice and becomes celebration. Training stops being effort and becomes devotion. And it all starts at a specific moment of the day, the moment that defines whether you'll live as a warrior or as a slave to circumstances. Musashi woke between 4 and 5 in the morning every day for decades, not because he had important meetings or deadlines to meet, but because he understood that the first victory of the day determines all others. When you wake before the sun, you're declaring war on your weakest self, the one who wants comfort, who negotiates 5 more minutes, who prefers the warmth of sheets to the coldness of reality. This first moment, when the alarm rings and your body screams for rest, is the most important battlefield of your life. Win there, and the rest of the day is just execution. Lose there and you've already started defeated. What happens in the first hours before dawn is sacred. The world still sleeps, distractions haven't awakened, and you have access to a quality of silence that doesn't exist at any other moment. Musashi used this time not to be productive in the modern sense, but to connect with something greater. He meditated, sharpened his sword, practiced movements in slow motion, read ancient texts. There was no hurry, no anxiety, just total presence. Compare this to you grabbing your phone, still lying in bed, invading your mind with notifications, problems, and comparisons before even getting up. You surrender your mental energy before using it. Modern science confirms what Musashi knew 400 years ago. The first hours after waking are when your prefrontal cortex is sharpest, your willpower is at its peak, and your focus capacity is maximum. Wasting this scrolling through social media feeds is like throwing gold in the sewer. The warrior protects these hours with his life because he knows this is where the discipline that will sustain the day's chaos is forged. But waking early is only half the equation. What you do in the first 20 minutes after rising determines whether you'll live as a warrior or as a hostage to circumstances. And that's where the next ritual comes in. Immediately after waking, Musashi didn't rush to be productive. He began with what the samurai called misogi, the purification ritual. This included washing his face with cold water, sometimes bathing in an icy river, even in harsh winter, and performing deep, controlled breaths. It wasn't about physical hygiene. It was about cleansing the mind of sleep's impurities, confused dreams, stagnant energies. This simple act created a clear separation between the man who slept and the warrior who now awakens. It was a symbolic death, followed by an intentional rebirth every morning. You wake up and immediately drag yourself to the bathroom like a zombie. Turn on the hot shower and let the warm water comfort you back towards sleep. Then you grab coffee, still half unconscious, and only gain mental clarity when caffeine finally hits your nervous system. You're reacting to life, not commanding it. Musashi did the opposite. Cold water was a deliberate shock that forced total presence, activated his nervous system, and made it impossible to continue on autopilot. He then sat in meditation posture, spine straight as a sword, and practiced mokuso, 5 to 10 minutes of absolute silence, observing his breath and thoughts without judgment. This ritual of purification and mental preparation isn't optional if you want to live as a warrior. It's the moment where you program your mind for the entire day. Musashi visualized possible confrontations, reviewed principles of strategy, and aligned his actions with his deepest values. When finished, he was no longer an ordinary man with fears and distractions. He was a sharpened weapon, calibrated, ready. You can adapt this today. Cold water on your face, 3 minutes of deep breathing, 5 minutes sitting in silence, visualizing your day with clarity. Do this, and when you exit meditation, you'll be a different person. And this person is ready for what comes next, the physical component that completes the warrior's armor. After mental purification, Musashi moved to physical training. It wasn't a modern gym with mirrors and motivational music. It was brutal, solitary practice with wooden swords, some weighing twice as much as real swords to strengthen wrists and forearms. He repeated the same movements 1,000 times, not until he got it right, but until he couldn't get it wrong. Tsuburi, the name given to these vertical and horizontal repetitions, was meditation in movement. Every cut was executed with total intention, as if life depended on it, because at some point it would. This training lasted between 1 and 3 hours, depending on the day, but was never skipped, never. You probably think of training as optional, depending on how you feel. If you woke up with energy, you'll train. If you're tired, you skip it and make up tomorrow. Musashi didn't have this luxury because he understood a fundamental truth. The body is the vehicle of will. If the vehicle is weak, will doesn't matter. He trained not to get strong, but so that strength would never be the variable determining his defeat. Physical training wasn't vanity, it was responsibility. It was honoring the body as the temple where discipline dwells. When you skip training, you're not just losing muscle, you're betraying the warrior you promised to be. What you can apply today doesn't need to be 3 hours of sword work. It can be 20 minutes of push-ups, squats, and sit-ups. It can be a 5-kilometer run. It can be yoga or martial arts. The specific exercise matters less than the principle, non-negotiable. Rain, cold, fatigue, pain, none of this is a valid excuse. Musashi trained with fever, with injuries, with hunger. Not because he was masochistic, but because he understood that the day you negotiate with your discipline is the day it dies. Finish the training, and you'll have conquered something no external reward can give, unshakable self-respect. But the warrior knows that strength without strategy is just brutality. And that's why the next ritual is as crucial as muscle. After intense physical training, Musashi didn't rush to the next task. He sat again in mokuso, the meditation of strategic silence, but this time with a different purpose. It wasn't purification like in the morning, it was observation and strategy. He mentally reviewed his movements, identified subtle errors, visualized imaginary opponents and their possible tactics. The silence wasn't empty. It was a mental laboratory where he tested 1,000 scenarios without risking his life. This period lasted between 15 minutes and an hour, depending on what his mind needed to process. This is where the warrior became strategist. You live in constant noise, music in headphones, phone notifications, background television, parallel conversations, your own mind screaming anxieties and worries non-stop. In this chaos, strategic thinking is impossible because deep thought requires deep silence. Musashi knew that the warrior who can't sit with himself in total quietude is a warrior who will be defeated by his own mental chaos. The external enemy is predictable. The internal enemy is chaotic. Mokuso was the tool to tame this chaos, transforming scattered thoughts into clarity sharp as a blade. Implementing this today means creating sacred blocks of absolute silence in your day. It can be 15 minutes after training. It can be mid-afternoon when work gets heavy. Turn everything off, sit with your spine straight, close your eyes, and simply observe your thoughts passing like clouds without clinging to any. Don't force concentration, just observe. Over time, you'll start noticing patterns, recurring fears, strategies your mind uses to sabotage you. This knowledge is power. Musashi used Mokuso to know himself so deeply that no enemy could surprise him because he'd already faced himself 1,000 times in silence. But knowledge without simplicity is unnecessary weight. And the next principle removes everything that doesn't serve. Musashi ate to survive, not for pleasure. Simple rice, occasional fish, seasonal vegetables, pure water. Nothing processed, nothing excessive. Nothing that didn't serve the purpose of keeping the body functional. He fasted regularly, not for trendy diets, but to train control over physical desires. When you master hunger, you master all other weaknesses because hunger is the most primitive impulse. If you can say no to a screaming stomach, you can say no to any other temptation. This brutal simplicity extended to everything. Simple clothes, minimal shelter, non-existent possessions. Fewer things meant fewer distractions, less maintenance, fewer dependencies. You live at the opposite extreme. You wake up already thinking about what you'll eat. Spend the day alternating between snacks and elaborate meals. Use food as reward, as emotional comfort, as entertainment. Your house is cluttered with objects you don't use, clothes you don't wear, technologies that promise to make life easier but only add complexity. Every possession is an invisible chain binding you. Every food choice is a negotiation where you almost always lose. Musashi didn't have these battles because he eliminated the choices. He ate the same, wore the same, carried only his sword. Radical freedom through radical simplicity. Applying this today doesn't mean becoming a monk, but it means brutally questioning every habit and possession. Do you really need 5 elaborate meals a day, or is that distraction? Do you need 40 pairs of shoes, or is that emotional compensation? Do you need to check emails 20 times a day, or is that escape from depth? Cut everything that doesn't directly serve the warrior you want to be. Musashi owned 2 swords and 1 book. You probably have 1,000 things and none essential. Simplify your diet, 2 solid meals, water, intermittent fasting. Simplify your possessions. If you haven't used it in 3 months, eliminate it. Simplify your habits. If it doesn't strengthen body, mind, or spirit, abandon it. But simplicity without reflection is just empty minimalism. The next ritual ensures you're on the right path. Before sleeping, Musashi practiced Hansei, the samurai art of brutal and honest self-reflection. It wasn't superficial gratitude or positive affirmations. It was a relentless inventory of the day, where he failed, where he hesitated, where his technique was imperfect, where his mind wandered. He sat in silence and reviewed every significant moment, like a general analyzes a battle after the confrontation. Not to punish himself, but to extract lessons. Every error identified was an opportunity not to repeat it tomorrow. Every victory was dissected to understand exactly what worked. This ritual transformed experience into wisdom, and wisdom into invincibility. You end the day collapsing in bed or numbing yourself with series, social media, anything that shuts off your brain. There's no reflection, no learning, no growth. You repeat the same mistakes indefinitely because you never stop to identify them. Tomorrow will be exactly like today because you extracted no lessons from today. Musashi understood that the warrior who doesn't reflect on his battles is condemned to eventually lose. Life is the greatest teacher, but only if you pay attention to the lessons. And Zay was the moment to pay total attention, without distractions, without excuses, without ego protecting your fragility. Implementing Hansei today is simple but uncomfortable. 10 minutes before sleep, sit with a notebook and answer 3 questions with brutal honesty. Where did I fail today? What did I learn from that failure? What will I do differently tomorrow? Don't write excuses, write truths. If you promised to wake at 5 and woke at 6, don't invent justifications about fatigue. Write, I chose comfort over discipline. Tomorrow I'll put the alarm far from the bed. Musashi did this mentally because his discipline was absolute, but you need to write because your mind still deceives you. This ritual closes the day's cycle and prepares the next. But the real question is, does this daily cycle build something greater, or is it just survival? The final principle answers this. Musashi lived to 62 and never lost a duel. But his true legacy isn't the victories, it's the Book of 5 Rings and the Dokudo, works that influence warriors, entrepreneurs, and strategists more than 400 years later. This legacy wasn't built in a moment of inspired genius. It was built over 10,000 days of impeccable routine, where every dawn he chose to be the warrior instead of being comfortable. Legacy isn't something you create at the end of life, it's something you build silently every 24 hours. Each day is a brick, alone, insignificant, stacked for decades, an immortal fortress. You probably think of legacy as something grand and distant, a book you'll write someday, a business you'll build when you have capital, a transformation you'll make when you have time. This mentality guarantees you'll die leaving nothing. Legacy isn't what you will do, it's what you're doing now, today, this hour. Musashi didn't wake up one day and decide to be legend. He woke up every day and decided to be disciplined. The legend was inevitable consequence. Your daily routine isn't preparation for the life that matters, it is the life that matters. Every perfect repetition, every moment of silence, every simple meal is a declaration of who you are. The final truth Musashi understood, and you need to internalize, is this. You have no control over results, only over actions. You can't guarantee victory, only impeccable preparation. You can't control recognition, only daily excellence. When you stop chasing legacy and start living as a warrior, legacy builds itself. People will feel your presence before hearing your words. Your silence will have more weight than others' shouts. Your consistency will inspire more than motivational speeches. But this only happens if you honor the sacred routine every day, without exception. Musashi did this for decades. The question isn't whether you can do it, it's whether you will do it. And that decision needs to be made now, not tomorrow. You've just received the exact routine that transformed an ordinary man into an immortal legend. These aren't tricks, these aren't shortcuts, these aren't productivity hacks. It's the brutal and honest structure Miyamoto Musashi used to win 60 duels and build a legacy that crosses centuries. Now, the most important question of your life is before you. What will you do tomorrow when the alarm rings at 5 in the morning? Will you roll over and negotiate 15 more minutes like you always did? Or will you get up, splash cold water on your face, and take the first step on the warrior's way? This choice, repeated for 90 consecutive days, won't just change your habits. It will completely rewrite who you are. Leave your answer in the comments now. Which of these samurai rituals will you implement first in your routine? The awakening before sunrise, the non-negotiable physical training, the strategic silence, the evening review, Declare your commitment publicly, because when you write, you commit. And when you commit publicly, the pressure to honor your word increases. Musashi had no one holding him accountable in the solitary mountains, but you have this community of modern warriors. Use this to your advantage. Write now what your first change will be tomorrow morning. If you felt this video touch something deep in you, if you recognized you're tired of living as a slave to inconsistency, then subscribe to this channel and activate notifications. This is the Digital Dojo, where men who want more from life gather to learn timeless samurai principles applied to the modern world. Every video is a lesson, every lesson is a tool, and every tool can save your life from mediocrity. Don't let this wisdom escape. Join us and walk the warrior's way. See you at the next training.